You might think our modern gardening methods are the pinnacle of efficiency, but ancient Greek farmers were solving problems we still struggle with today, using techniques that cost almost nothing. After 40 years of testing different growing methods, I've discovered these Greek innovations often outperform expensive modern systems by working with nature instead of against it. Today, we're exploring 10 ancient Greek techniques that are more efficient than modern gardening, and every single one is easy to use in your backyard. Stay with me, because number 8 creates fertilizer that beats anything from the garden center. And the bonus tip reveals a Greek watering secret that can cut your garden work in half. The first ancient technique we need to discuss is Amphora irrigation, which was essentially the original Ulla system. Greek gardeners understood something brilliant about clay's natural porosity that we've only recently rediscovered. They would bury large clay amphorae, those beautiful two-handled vessels you see in museums, directly into the soil near their most valuable plants. Once buried up to the neck, they'd fill these vessels with water that would slowly seep through the clay walls over several days. What makes this so remarkable is how it delivers water exactly where plants need it, right at root level, without any surface evaporation or runoff. The steady moisture release creates a consistent growing environment that modern drip systems try to replicate with plastic tubes and timers. You can recreate this today using unglazed terracotta pots buried halfway into your garden beds. Simply plug the drainage hole with cork or wax. Bury the pot near your tomatoes or squash and fill it once a week. The clay naturally regulates moisture release based on soil conditions, releasing more water when it's dry and less when it's moist. This self-regulating system is particularly effective for thirsty crops like melons, peppers, and eggplants that suffer when moisture levels fluctuate. In my own garden, switching to buried clay pots reduced my watering frequency by 70% while actually improving plant health. The roots grow toward the moisture source, creating a concentrated feeding zone that makes fertilizing more efficient too. Archaeological evidence shows some Greek amphorae irrigation systems lasted for decades, making this a one-time investment that keeps providing benefits year after year. Mixed companion planting is our second technique, and the Greeks approached it like they were balancing the powers of their gods. They understood that certain plants had natural affinities and antagonisms long before we had scientific explanations for allelopathy and nutrient cycling. Their gardens weren't neat monoculture rows, but carefully orchestrated communities where each plant played a specific role. Legumes like lentils and chickpeas were interplanted with grains to fix nitrogen in the soil, while aromatic herbs protected vulnerable crops from pests. This wasn't random mixing, but strategic placement based on centuries of observation. You can apply these same principles by planting beans at the base of your corn, allowing them to climb the stalks while enriching the soil. Basil planted near your tomatoes doesn't just provide convenient harvesting for caprese salads. It actively repels aphids and whiteflies while possibly improving tomato flavor. The Greeks particularly valued what they called sacred combinations, like grapevines with roses, where the roses would show disease symptoms first, warning vintners to treat their grapes. In your garden, try planting nasturtiums as trap crops near your brassicas, drawing aphids away from your cabbage and broccoli. Marigolds weren't just decorative borders, but functional pest deterrents that the Greeks planted throughout their gardens. But what makes this system more efficient than modern monoculture is how it reduces pest problems naturally, improves soil health without synthetic inputs, and maximizes space by growing multiple crops in the same area. My own Three Sisters garden of corn, beans, and squash produces more food per square foot than any single crop planting ever could. The Greeks knew that diversity meant resilience, and their mixed gardens could weather droughts, pest invasions, and diseases that would devastate single crop fields. Stone mulching represents the third technique, and it's perhaps the most misunderstood ancient practice that actually works brilliantly. Greek farmers in arid regions discovered that placing flat stones between their plant rows created what we now understand as a sophisticated microclimate management system. During the day, these stones would shade the soil, reducing surface temperature and evaporation by up to 60% according to modern studies of similar techniques. At night, the stones would radiate stored heat, protecting plants from sudden temperature drops while their undersides collected condensation from cooling air. This captured moisture would drip into the soil, providing plants with water even during rainless periods. The technique is especially effective in Mediterranean climates, or anywhere with hot days and cool nights. In your garden, you can use flat flagstones, river rocks, or even broken concrete pieces to create these moisture-trapping, temperature-moderating surfaces. Place them around heat-loving plants like peppers, eggplants, and melons, leaving space for air circulation around the stem. The stones also suppress weeds without the need for chemical herbicides, reduce soil splash that can spread diseases, and create habitat for beneficial insects like ground beetles that prey on garden pests. I've used this technique in my herb spiral, where the stones not only conserve moisture, but also provide the drainage that Mediterranean herbs require. Unlike organic mulches that decompose and need regular replacement, stone mulch is a one-time application that continues working indefinitely. The Greeks often arranged their stones in patterns that directed rainwater toward plant roots, essentially creating a permanent irrigation system that required no maintenance. Now, if you're finding this video helpful so far, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us reach more gardeners like yourself who would also find it so helpful to avoid these mistakes. All right, let's keep going. Terrace gardens, our fourth ancient technique, show how the Greeks transformed challenging landscapes into highly productive growing spaces. On the rocky hillsides of Greece, farmers carved stepped gardens that captured every drop of rain while preventing precious topsoil from washing away. Each terrace level created its own microclimate, with upper levels perfect for drought-tolerant herbs and lower levels ideal for water-loving vegetables. The stone retaining walls absorbed heat during the day and released it at night, extending the growing season for tender crops. This isn't just historical curiosity. It's a solution for anyone dealing with a sloped yard that seems impossible to garden. You can build simple terraces using stacked stones, timber, or even repurposed concrete blocks, creating level planting areas that are easier to work and water. The key is making each terrace slightly tilted backward to catch and hold rainfall rather than letting it run off. In my own sloped backyard, 3 simple terraces transformed an unusable hill into the most productive part of my garden. The upper terrace grows Mediterranean herbs that thrive in quick-draining soil. The middle level produces abundant tomatoes and peppers with captured heat from the retaining wall, and the bottom terrace stays moist enough for lettuce and celery even in summer. Water naturally percolates from upper to lower levels, creating a self-irrigating system that reduces watering needs by half. The terraces also make gardening physically easier since you're not constantly fighting gravity or watching your amendments wash downhill. Modern permaculture has rediscovered these principles, but the Greeks perfected them thousands of years ago. Their terraced gardens often included small channels carved into rock to direct water precisely where needed, a detail worth copying if you're serious about water conservation. The fifth technique involves lunar planting, and while it might sound mystical, the Greeks were onto something scientifically valid. They observed that the moon's gravitational pull affects moisture in soil just as it affects ocean tides, creating subtle but measurable changes in plant growth patterns. During the waxing moon, as it moves from new to full, they planted above-ground crops like tomatoes, peppers, and beans, believing increased lunar pull drew energy upward into leaves and fruits. During the waning moon, they focused on root vegetables like carrots, onions, and potatoes, reasoning that decreasing lunar pull encouraged downward root growth. Modern research has found that seeds absorb more water during the full moon, potentially improving germination rates, and that soil moisture does indeed fluctuate with lunar cycles. You can easily test this in your own garden by keeping a simple planting calendar aligned with moon phases. Plant your leafy greens and flowering plants during the waxing moon, particularly in the few days before the full moon when lunar moisture is highest. Save transplanting for the waning moon when reduced moisture stress helps plants establish roots. The new moon period is ideal for maintenance tasks like weeding, pruning, and soil preparation. I was skeptical until I tried planting identical tomato seedlings during different moon phases and saw consistently better growth in those planted during the waxing moon. The difference isn't dramatic, maybe 15 to 20% improved yield, but when you're already doing the work of planting, why not time it for maximum benefit? Greek farmers also noted that pest activity increased during the full moon, so they avoided planting vulnerable seedlings then. Whether you believe in lunar influence or not, having a structured planting schedule based on natural cycles helps organize garden tasks and often leads to better results. Natural pest repellents form our sixth technique, and the Greeks understood aromatic defense better than we give them credit for. They didn't just grow herbs for cooking and medicine, but strategically placed them throughout gardens as living pesticides. Thyme, oregano, and mint weren't confined to herb gardens, but interplanted with vegetables to confuse and repel insects through their strong essential oils. This approach recognizes that most garden pests locate their target plants through chemical signals, and aromatic herbs essentially jam those signals. You can create these same aromatic barriers by planting rosemary near your cabbage family plants to deter cabbage moths, or placing pots of mint around your garden's perimeter to discourage ants and rodents. The Greeks particularly valued wormwood, a bitter herb that repels nearly everything from aphids to rabbits when planted as a border. Garlic and onions were grown not just as crops, but as protective barriers around more vulnerable plants. In my garden, a border of society garlic has eliminated aphid problems on nearby roses without a single spray. What makes this superior to modern pesticides is that beneficial insects aren't harmed. In fact, many aromatic herbs attract predatory wasps and hoverflies that control pest populations naturally. The flowers of herbs like oregano and thyme provide nectar for these garden allies, while their oils deter harmful insects. You can also make powerful spray repellents by steeping these herbs in water, creating natural pesticides that won't harm soil biology or leave toxic residues on your food. The Greeks often burned aromatic herbs in their gardens, believing the smoke purified the air and prevented disease. While we now know plant diseases spread through different mechanisms, essential oil vapors from herbs do have antimicrobial properties that may reduce fungal problems in humid conditions. Clay pot microclimates, our seventh ancient technique, shows how Greeks created greenhouse effects without glass or plastic. They discovered that inverted clay pots, or specially made clay cloches placed over young plants, created protective environments that extended the growing season significantly. The porous clay would absorb moisture during the day and release it at night, maintaining humidity levels that prevented transplant shock and frost damage. These miniature greenhouses trapped solar heat while still allowing air exchange through the clay's natural porosity, avoiding the overheating problems of modern plastic row covers. You can recreate this using standard terracotta pots inverted over seedlings, propping them up slightly with stones for ventilation. This technique is particularly valuable for getting tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants established early in spring when nights are still cool. The clay moderates temperature swings that stress young plants, keeping them several degrees warmer at night and cooler during hot afternoons. In my garden, using clay cloches has allowed me to plant warm season crops 3 weeks earlier than usual, gaining almost a month of extra growing season. The Greeks also used broken pottery shards arranged in tent formations over plants, creating adjustable protection that could be modified as plants grew. For tender perennials like rosemary in cold climates, a large clay pot filled with straw and inverted over the plant provides winter protection superior to plastic wraps or burlap. The technique works because clay breathes, preventing the moisture buildup that causes rot under plastic covers. Ancient Greek gardeners even developed specialized bell-shaped covers with small holes at the top for controlled ventilation. These ceramic cloches were valuable enough to be passed down through generations, proving their effectiveness over centuries of use. Composting with animal manure and ash brings us to technique number 8, and this ancient fertilizer formula still beats most commercial products. The Greeks perfected a balanced approach to soil fertility by combining nitrogen-rich animal manures with potassium-heavy wood ash and carbon-rich plant materials. They understood that fresh manure could burn plants, so they aged it in specific proportions with ash to create a balanced, slow-release fertilizer. Their typical mix was 1 part aged goat or sheep manure, 1/4 part wood ash, and 2 parts plant residues or straw, layered and turned regularly over several months. This created what we now know as a perfectly balanced NPK ratio with trace minerals that synthetic fertilizers can't match. You can replicate this using whatever animal manure is locally available, whether from chickens, rabbits, or horses, mixing it with wood ash, from your fireplace or fire pit. The key is the ash proportion. Too much creates alkalinity problems, but the right amount provides potassium and calcium while neutralizing manure's acidity. Add kitchen scraps, grass clippings, and fallen leaves to provide the carbon that feeds beneficial microorganisms. The Greeks often added crushed seashells or bones for additional calcium and phosphorus, creating complete nutrition for their crops. In my experience, this ancient formula produces vegetables with flavor intensity that store-bought fertilizers never achieve. Tomatoes grown with this mixture have deeper color and richer taste, while root vegetables develop better texture and sweetness. The slow-release nature means you fertilize less frequently while maintaining steady growth without the flush and crash of chemical fertilizers. This composting method also builds soil structure, improving water retention in sandy soils and drainage in clay, benefits that purchased fertilizers don't provide. Sacred tree planting, our 9th technique, reveals how the Greeks viewed perennial crops as the foundation of sustainable gardens rather than just decorative additions. They planted olive trees, figs, and pomegranates in carefully planned patterns that created beneficial relationships between trees and annual crops below. These weren't random plantings, but sophisticated agroforestry systems where tree spacing allowed filtered sunlight for understory vegetables, while deep roots pulled nutrients from subsoil layers that shallow-rooted crops couldn't reach. The leaf drop from these trees provided constant mulch and gradual fertilization, while their presence moderated temperature extremes and wind damage. You can apply these principles by incorporating fruit trees into your vegetable garden rather than segregating them in a separate orchard. A single fig tree can provide afternoon shade for lettuce beds that would otherwise bolt in summer heat, while its fallen leaves improve soil organic matter each autumn. The Greeks particularly valued nitrogen-fixing trees like carob and acacia, which enrich soil for nearby plants while providing food or fodder. In modern gardens, serviceberries, mulberries, or dwarf fruit trees can serve similar functions, creating vertical growing space while sheltering tender crops. My own garden transformed when I stopped thinking of it as separate zones and started integrating apple trees among the vegetables. The trees provide structure for climbing beans, their blossoms attract pollinators that improve squash yields, and fallen fruit feeds beneficial soil organisms. The Greeks understood that trees are permanent soil improvement systems, their roots breaking up compaction, creating drainage channels, and hosting mycorrhizal fungi that benefit all plants. They often planted trees in triangular groves that created protected microclimates in the center, perfect for tender vegetables. This long-term thinking meant each generation inherited increasingly fertile and productive land. something our annual focused gardening rarely achieves. Graywater reuse rounds out our 10 techniques, and the ancient Greeks were recycling water thousands of years before it became an environmental necessity. They developed sophisticated systems for capturing water from baths, kitchen washing, and even laundry, directing it through settling basins and gravel filters before using it for irrigation. Their understanding that plants could purify and benefit from nutrient-rich wastewater predates modern constructed wetlands by millennia. The key was separating graywater from black water, using only relatively clean water from washing for garden irrigation. You can implement simple graywater systems by directing washing machine discharge to fruit trees, or installing a basic basin under your kitchen sink for vegetable washing water. The nutrients in graywater, particularly phosphorus from soaps and nitrogen from food particles, actually benefit plants when properly diluted and distributed. The Greeks often directed graywater to mulch basins around trees, where organic matter could filter and break down any contaminants. In dry climates, this technique can reduce garden water needs by 40%, while keeping valuable nutrients in your landscape instead of sending them to sewage treatment. My own graywater system, inspired by ancient designs, sends shower and washing water to a series of mulched basins that support a thriving food forest. The key is using biodegradable soaps and avoiding graywater on plants you eat raw. Root vegetables and fruit trees are ideal recipients since the soil filters any concerns before they reach edible portions. The Greeks also understood that moving water doesn't breed mosquitoes, so they designed channels with slight slopes that kept graywater flowing toward planted areas. This ancient water wisdom becomes more relevant each year as water scarcity increases and gardeners seek sustainable irrigation solutions that our ancestors had already perfected. And now for the bonus tip that ancient Greek gardeners swore by for reducing garden work. They discovered that planting in sunken beds rather than raised ones in dry climates created self-watering gardens that needed attention only once a week, even in summer heat. These sunken beds, called hydroplanting, were carved 6 to 8 inches below ground level with sloped edges that directed every drop of rain or irrigation water toward plant roots. The surrounding soil acted like a sponge, wicking moisture laterally into the growing area while the depression protected plants from drying winds. You can create these water harvesting beds by simply digging out pathways and mounting that soil onto growing areas in reverse of typical raised beds. The paths become water channels during rain, while the slight depression of planting areas maintains moisture far longer than surface gardens. This completely inverts our modern raised bed thinking, but makes perfect sense in any climate, with hot, dry summers where water conservation matters more than drainage. Thanks for sticking with me through the entire video. If you found this helpful, give it a like, subscribe for more gardening tips, and check out our other videos on growing a better garden.